The studio lights were blinding. The audience was so quiet you could hear the air conditioning hum. 52 million people were watching live across America, and somewhere in that crowd, standing completely still while everyone else leaned forward in their seats, was a woman named Carol Whitfield, 51 years old, wearing a blouse she had borrowed from a shelter volunteer with $63 left to her name. The host's voice cut through the silence like a blade. And the final answer is... Carol's hands were shaking so badly she had to press them flat against her thighs. Her lips were moving. She wasn't praying for money. She was praying to simply survive one more day. What happened next would break the internet, shatter a marriage, and change Carol's life in ways she never could have prepared for. But here is the part that most people never talk about. What Carol lost before she won was far more devastating than anything you've seen on television. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click that subscribe button right now so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Now let's get back to Carol's story. Because 8 weeks before that moment under those blazing studio lights, Carol Whitfield had been sitting inside a 2009 Honda Civic with 2 duffel bags, a cracked phone screen, and a divorce decree that had stripped her of nearly everything she had spent 23 years building. The street outside was dark. It was February, and the temperature had dropped to 19 degrees. She had nowhere to go. Carol had grown up in Decatur, Georgia, the second of 4 children, raised by a mother who worked double shifts at a hospital laundry, and a father who drove a school bus and coached Little League on weekends. They were not wealthy, but there was always food, always warmth, always the unspoken agreement that family looked after. Family. She had met Daniel Whitfield at a church fundraiser when she was 27. He was 31, tall, well-spoken, with the kind of easy confidence that made people in a room naturally drift toward him. He sold commercial real estate and was just beginning to climb. He wore pressed shirts even on Saturdays. He opened car doors. He called her mother ma'am. Carol had thought, this is a man who knows how to take care of things. What she didn't realize yet was that Daniel's definition of taking care of things extended only to himself. They married 11 months after they met. Carol had been a medical billing coordinator earning a decent income and had recently completed an online accounting course at night. She had plans, a promotion she was angling for, a small business idea she had been sketching out in a notebook. But when Daniel's career took off and they moved from Decatur to a larger home in Alpharetta, something quietly shifted. You don't need to work so hard, Daniel told her early in the marriage. Let me carry this. That's what I'm here for. It sounded like love. It felt like protection. It was a trap. Over the years, Carol stopped working full-time to raise their 2 children, Priya and Marcus. She managed the house, managed the schedules, managed Daniel's social calendar, planned his clients' dinners, and made sure their home looked like something out of a magazine. Daniel's income grew. They drove good cars. They took vacations. From the outside, they looked like success. But Daniel handled every financial account, every investment, every property. Carol's name was on almost nothing. When she occasionally asked questions about retirement accounts, about the mortgage, about where certain money was going, Daniel would smile patiently, the way someone smiles at a child who has asked a complicated question, and say, "I've got it covered, babe. Don't stress yourself." And because she trusted him, she didn't push. That was the mistake she would spend years regretting. The first real warning sign came 6 years before the divorce. Carol found a dinner receipt in Daniel's jacket pocket, a restaurant she didn't recognize, 2 glasses of wine, a dessert for 2. When she asked about it, Daniel said it was a client dinner and that he'd forgotten to mention it. She believed him. She wanted to believe him. Then there was the weekend conference in Charlotte that turned out to have ended a day earlier than Daniel had told her, and the assistant at his office who left the company suddenly and whose name Daniel refused to say without his jaw going tight, and the password he changed on his laptop one Tuesday night without explanation. Carol noticed all of it, And she told herself stories to make it make sense. Because the alternative, that the man she had given everything to was not who she believed him to be, was too enormous to hold. She threw herself deeper into the children, into the church, into volunteering. She kept the house perfect. She stayed quiet. She hoped. Then, on a Tuesday in November, Daniel came home early. He set his briefcase down with unusual care. He sat across from her at the kitchen table. He folded his hands. "I want a divorce," he said. Carol felt the room tilt. "What?" "I've been unhappy for a long time. I've already spoken to a lawyer. I think it's better if we handle this quickly and with as little drama as possible. As little drama as possible." She later learned that Daniel had spent the previous 8 months preparing. A lawyer had been quietly working on asset transfers for nearly a year. The house in Alpharetta, which Carol had decorated, maintained, and poured her heart into for 14 years, had been refinanced and placed in a business LLC in Daniel's name. A second property they had purchased together as an investment had also been transferred. 2 joint savings accounts had been slowly drained over a period of months, small withdrawals timed so they wouldn't trigger alerts. By the time Carol hired her own attorney, there was almost nothing left to fight over. Daniel had structured everything so legally, so methodically, that her lawyer shook her head and said, "He planned this very carefully, Carol. This didn't happen by accident." Carol got a modest settlement, barely enough to cover a few months of expenses. No house, no savings to speak of. Her children were adults. Priya lived in Seattle. Marcus was in his 2nd year of college. There was no family home to return to. Carol's closest friends, many of whom had known Daniel first and considered him charming and successful and blameless, quietly drifted away. One of them, a woman named Bethany, who had been her closest confidant for 11 years, sent a text that said simply, "I hope you find peace," and then went silent. On the last night in the house, Carol walked through every room. She stood in the kitchen where she had made 10,000 meals. She stood in the hallway where her children had measured their heights against the wall in pencil. She had always meant to transfer those marks somehow, preserve them. She stood at the bedroom window and looked out at the backyard where they had held birthday parties and Easter egg hunts and one very rainy July 4th barbecue that everyone still laughed about. Then she carried 2 duffel bags to her car and drove away. For the first 3 weeks, Carol stayed at a Motel 6, stretching her money as carefully as she could. She applied for jobs, accounting positions, billing coordinator roles, even receptionist jobs. Her resume had a gap of nearly 15 years. Interviews were polite and then silent. One hiring manager, a young man barely older than her son, told her that her skills were a little dated, without quite meeting her eyes. She spent evenings in the motel parking lot because the room felt too small. She ate crackers and peanut butter. She called Marcus on Sundays and told him she was fine, that she was sorting things out, because she could not bear to hear the worry in his voice. When the motel money ran out, she moved into her car. She parked near a 24-hour gym where she had a monthly membership, the cheapest one she could find, so she could shower each morning. She learned which McDonald's had the most reliable Wi-Fi. She learned that a library card was free, and that the library opened at 9 and closed at 8, and that the chairs near the back were quiet enough to think. She cried mostly at night. In the daytime, she made herself move, because stillness felt too close to surrender. If you're still watching up to now, type "I'm still here" in the comments section. This story is only getting more intense from here. It was in the library, on a Thursday afternoon in late January, that everything changed. Not in a dramatic, cinematic way, but in the quiet, accidental way that real life actually works. Carol was at a public computer, updating her resume, when a woman sat down at the terminal beside her and began struggling with an online form. She was older, maybe mid-60s, with silver hair and reading glasses pushed up on her forehead. "I'm sorry," the woman said after a few minutes. "Do you know how to attach a file to this? My granddaughter usually helps me, but she's at school." Carol helped her, They got to talking. The woman's name was Dorothy Sims, and she had just retired from a position on the board of a nonprofit. Dorothy was sharp, warm, and observant in the way that only certain people who have lived through real difficulty manage to be. They talked for nearly 2 hours. Carol didn't mean to tell Dorothy her story, but something about the woman's steadiness made it easy to be honest. Dorothy listened without interrupting. When Carol finished, Dorothy was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Do you know the show, The Great American Comeback?" Carol had heard of it vaguely. A nationally televised quiz and skills competition show that had launched about 2 years earlier. Contestants competed in rounds of financial knowledge, life skills, and problem-solving challenges. The grand prize rotated each season. This season, it was $550 million, a combination of cash prize and a sponsored investment portfolio, funded by a consortium of financial literacy organizations trying to generate attention for their cause. "They're doing open auditions next week," Dorothy said. "The show specifically recruits people who've been through financial hardship. That's the whole point of it." Carol shook her head slowly. "I haven't watched television in months. I don't know if I—" "You just spent 2 hours explaining to me the exact mechanics of how your husband hid assets across LLCs and shell accounts," Dorothy said, looking at her directly. "Carol, you know more about finance than you think you do. You learned it the hard way." The audition was held on a Saturday morning at a hotel conference center in downtown Atlanta. Carol wore the best blouse she had, ironed the night before using the iron at the gym, which she had asked the front desk attendant if she could borrow. There were hundreds of people in line. She almost left twice. She stayed. The audition process took 3 rounds over 2 weeks. Carol answered questions about interest rates, insurance clauses, retirement account structures, estate law basics. The producers were looking not just for knowledge, but for story, for the kind of resilience that translated to television. Carol had plenty of story. She was selected. The call came on a Wednesday morning while she was parked outside the library. She held the phone against her ear and didn't speak for a full 10 seconds after the producer finished telling her. "Miss Whitfield, are you still there?" "Yes," she said. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I'm still here." The show flew her to Los Angeles. A production assistant met her at the airport with a sign bearing her name. She was taken to a hotel, a real hotel, with a bathtub and a minibar and a bed so soft it felt almost wrong. She lay on top of the covers that first night and stared at the ceiling and thought about the parking lot behind the gym and the cracker boxes and the library chairs. She thought about Daniel sitting across the kitchen table with his hands folded. She thought about Bethany's text. She thought about the pencil marks on the hallway wall that she hadn't been able to save. Then she got up, opened the minibar, took out a bottle of water, sat at the desk, and started reviewing her notes. The competition had 5 rounds over 3 days of filming. Carol won the first round, a financial knowledge segment, by the widest margin of any contestant in the show's 2-season history. The producers were stunned. The host, a man named Kevin Rallis, who had been doing the show since its launch, told her off camera, "I have never seen anyone answer the asset protection questions that fast." She smiled and didn't explain why. The second round was harder, a problem-solving simulation involving a fictional small business in financial distress. Carol worked through it methodically, quietly, the way she had learned to work through her own crisis. Samurai. By step, one thing at a time. Don't look at the whole mountain, just the next foothold. She made it to the final round. And that is where we came in. The studio. The silence. 52 million viewers. The host's voice carrying across the room like something from a dream. The final question was a multi-part challenge involving a complex estate scenario. The kind of legal and financial puzzle that required not just knowledge, but judgment. The ability to hold several competing facts simultaneously and find the thread that connected them. Carol stood at the podium. She read the question. She closed her eyes for exactly 4 seconds. She answered. Kevin Rallis looked down at his card. Then he looked up at Carol. Then he broke into a smile so wide that the audience, who had been holding their collective breath, knew before he said a single word. "Carol Whitfield, you are our winner." The noise that erupted in that studio was the kind that you feel in your chest before you process it with your ears. Carol's knees buckled. She grabbed the edge of the podium. A production assistant rushed to her side. The audience was on its feet. Kevin Rallis was crossing the stage toward her with his arms open. Carol dropped to her knees. Not theatrically, not for the cameras. She just ran out of the ability to stand. She covered her face with both hands and stayed like that for a long time while the studio roared around her. She was thinking about a parking lot, a cracked phone screen, 19 degrees. She was thinking about what it cost to get to this moment. If this story has moved you, please hit that like button right now, drop a comment, and share this video with someone who needs to hear it today. The broadcast aired 2 nights later. Within 48 hours, Carol's story had been picked up by every major news outlet in the country. A local Atlanta station ran a segment titled "The Woman Who Lost Everything." It went viral. Social media did what social media does. It found her story and amplified it until it was everywhere. Inescapable. Impossible to ignore. Daniel Whitfield saw it from his living room. He called Carol's cell phone that same evening. She didn't answer. He called again the next morning. She didn't answer that time either. He sent a text. "Carol, I've been thinking about everything. I'd like to talk. I'm sorry for how things happened." She read it. She put her phone face down on the hotel desk. She sat with that text for a long time. Not with anger, exactly, but with something clearer and harder to name. A kind of recognition. The understanding that some apologies arrive exactly as useful as a door offered after the storm has already passed. Former friends began reaching out. Bethany sent a long message. 2 paragraphs of explanation, 1 paragraph of apology. There were distant family members who had chosen Daniel's side during the divorce, who now seemed to remember that they had always believed in Carol. Lawyers representing various financial interests called the production company. A real estate developer somehow got her number and left a voicemail about investment opportunities. Carol met with her new financial advisors. The show provided them as part of the prize package. And she listened carefully to everything they said about taxes and trusts and portfolio management. She asked questions. She took notes. She had been learning this language for months the hard way. She found she understood more of it than anyone expected. She bought a small house in a quiet neighborhood outside Atlanta. 2 bedrooms, a yard. She had the hallway painted the same color as the house in Alpharetta, and she took out a photograph she had kept on her phone of those pencil marks on the wall. Heights, dates, her children's names in her own handwriting. And she had an artist recreate them carefully on the new hallway wall. Priya flew in from Seattle the first weekend Carol was in the house. She stood in the hallway and looked at those marks for a long time without speaking. "Mom," she finally said, "how did you survive all of that?" Carol thought about it honestly. "1 day at a time," she said, "and then 1 hour at a time, and then sometimes just 1 breath." She didn't respond to Daniel. She didn't make a public statement about the divorce. She didn't go on the talk shows that called. When a reporter finally reached her directly and asked how she felt about her ex-husband watching her win $550 million on live television, Carol was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I hope he finds peace." And she meant it. Not because what he did was acceptable, not because it hadn't cost her nearly everything, but because she had come to understand that bitterness is a weight. And she had already spent too long carrying things that weren't hers to carry. Within the first year after her win, Carol established the Secondhand Foundation, a nonprofit providing financial literacy workshops, legal aid referrals, and emergency housing assistance to women navigating divorce and financial abuse. She partnered with Dorothy Sims, who joined the board. The foundation served 300 women in its first 8 months of operation. By the end of year 2, it had expanded to 6 cities. She was not trying to be a symbol. She was not trying to make a point. She was simply doing the thing that seemed most obvious to her once she had the means to do it, turning her worst years into someone else's lifeline. She once told a woman at one of her workshops, a woman who reminded her of herself, sitting in a folding chair with her hands clasped tight in her lap. The hardest part isn't starting over. The hardest part is believing you're allowed to. She let that sit in the room for a moment. You're allowed to, she said quietly. I promise you, you're allowed to. There are people in this world who believe that what happens to us defines us, that loss is permanent, that the ground taken from us cannot be recovered, that the people who hollow us out have the final word. Carol Whitfield's story is not the story of a lottery. It is not the story of luck falling into the right person's lap at the right moment. It is the story of a woman who sat in a freezing car on a winter night with nothing left to lose, and chose, the next morning, to get up anyway, to shower at a gym, to go to a library, to help a stranger with a form, to stand in a line she almost left, to answer questions she had learned by surviving them. She once believed losing everything meant losing herself. She found out that sometimes life has to empty your hands completely before it can show you what you are always capable of holding. If stories like this remind you that hope can find you in the hardest places, subscribe to our channel and join us for more stories of resilience, justice, and second chances. Like this video, share it with someone who needs it today, and comment below. If someone betrayed you like this, could you choose peace the way Carol did? Do you believe this was luck, or do you believe perseverance has a way of finding its own reward? Because sometimes the greatest endings really do begin with the hardest goodbyes.